is done of all the outstanding arrears, and equally we have received commitment from Treasury on availability of resources. So once that reconciliation has been done, the Principal Secretary is going to ensure that all the outstanding arrears are paid.
We were in a conversation, a consultative discussion, and there is no any agreement that is there between us and the ministry on the industry policy, because we have not been told the problem with the current policy. So it is very difficult to have a conversation on a new policy where we do not know what is the problem with the current policy. And therefore, we have not even seen any document that showing that is a draft of the new policy. So we believe that interns that need to be posted should be pegged on the collective bargaining agreement, which is a court order, and the current policy that's in existence. We have fully complied to the court order. And the court gave 6 orders, and I think it's very important that you read them. The 6th order told us to suspend the strike, pegged on the institution of a one nation approach. That order number 542 came before number 6. So we must have that meeting, agree on the issues that we have raised, have a return to work formula that suspends the strike. That's how the court gave that order, and the judge was very wise to put it as the last order. So we are not in contempt of any particular court orders. And again, I must say that if we don't have that one nation approach on the issues, it is us as a union who will take the government for contempt.
Now, doctors have maintained that their strike, which started on Thursday last week, is still on, and until all their demands are met. Speaking moments after holding the meeting, the doctors acknowledged that even though the ministry had shown goodwill and commitment to ensure the issues were resolved, they would not call off the strike despite promises by the ministry to solve some of the issues falling within its mandate. The KMPDU Secretary General Davji Atela, whom we've just heard, claimed that the union has in the past held meetings with the government, but the commitments arrived at had never been implemented. So the doctor strike, as mentioned, is still on, and they hope that they'll be able to solve that issue as well with the Ministry of Health. Now, Interior and National Administration Cabinet Secretary Professor Kithure Kindiki has directed security agencies in Kericho County to arrest organizers and financiers of the violence witnessed during a public event attended by President William Ruto in Belgut, Kericho County. The CS also instructed the police to monitor cases of unrest at political rallies, complete investigations, and arrest organizers, financiers, and perpetrators of thuggery in the county, regardless of their political or social status.
We have noticed with concern an increasing tendency of intolerance among political leaders, and we are asking political leaders to conduct their politics within the law, and they must maintain the peace in their political meetings. No person is allowed to disrupt public meetings, to use guns, to mete out violence and harass members of the public. I have left very firm and clear directives on the Trans Nzoia County Security Committee to be firm, ruthless, and merciless on all people who sponsor, finance, encourage, support, aid, and abet goons and political thugs who go to disrupt meetings organized by people of a different viewpoint. And it doesn't matter whether the organizers and sponsors are pro or anti-government. We will crush them equally, and nobody is above the law. I repeat, for the avoidance of doubts, nobody is above the law. And this hooliganism and disruption has taken a life of itself, not just here in Trans Nzoia. You saw last week the kind of activities that were taking place in presidential meetings in Kericho and Bomet. We made it clear that that will not be countenanced. So we are not, as we are not part of the political discussions, our work is to secure the nation and make sure that everybody follows the law, and people who transact their political businesses, economic businesses, do so peacefully.
All right, let's take a look at the newspapers and see what is making headlines and why. We begin with the Standard that speaks on housing billions. Ruto has his way. Housing billions, Ruto has his way, raiding pockets. Now the president today assents to the bill that will see him collect 90 billion shillings. Well, initially it was supposed to be on Monday, but they pushed it to today. He will be signing into law that bill that seeks to collect 90 billion shillings more in revenue to construct affordable houses. The journey has been steep, but the government will have the last laugh unless someone pulls a fast one yet again. Now, the housing bill is a go-ahead after the Senate passed that particular bill, and we had this conversation on the broadcast yesterday about the housing bill and which way forward. Now, I'll give you some of the numbers that you need to know about this particular bill that has been at the forefront and the center of conversations across the public. Now, in 2023-2024, the financial year that we are in right now, the government expects to collect 63.2 billion shillings. That's the target. Now, at the end of the financial year, perhaps we'll have a clear way of what they have collected so far. Now, 2024-2025, the financial bill that is coming up, they expect to collect 70 billion shillings. Now, in the financial year that follows, that is 2025-2026, there's a target of 78 billion. And then the financial year of 2026-2027, which will be the William Ruto's last financial year in government, just before the elections, will be about 89 billion shillings. Now, the annual deficit for housing units in the country is 200,000 units. So the government hopes to construct 200,000 units yearly. Now, we're also looking at units under construction in the country so far, 46,792. Housing units ready to commence construction is about 40,000, as well as housing units in the pipeline is about 746,795. So the housing scheme, the billions that government cannot afford to lose, as I've given you statistics of just what they expect to collect. So we're speaking about a paltry 90 billion shillings in the last financial year, and so far this year they expect to collect 63.2 billion shillings. The housing billions, Ruto has his way. Now, the journey has been steep. This is, including the court cases and the, court halting it, twice, the High Court and the Court of Appeal as well. And so the government said, the tax, if you're going to come up with it as a tax law, we're not able to manage. So they decided to actually go the legislative way and put it up as a law or as a bill. And now subsequently, it will be an act. Now, unless someone decides to pull a fast one yet again, that will see it halted, well, the government has the last laugh. So that is on the housing bill on the newspapers. Also, top of the page, uncertainty as ministry chops school money. Now, the education ministry says it's facing a 22 billion shillings shortfall attributed to stagnant funding for 6 years, despite a surging student population. Now, the Ministry of Education says it's facing a 22 billion shillings shortfall attributed to stagnant funding for 6 years, despite a surging student population. And that is a story that is on page 10. Now, in numbers as well, the annual capitation over the last 6 years has been 54 billion. Current capitation per student is 17,000 shillings, down from 22,000, basically what the government is paying for each learner in school. Remember, when you're taking your child to school, particularly in high school, there's an ultimate fee, school fees, you're given to as the fee structure, which will be roughly about, 40,000, 50,000, depending on whether it's a national school or an extra county school. And so if, the government capitation is not there, well, that number really rises to about even 100,000 for some schools, even 70,000 or 60,000 to some of the schools. But with the government now coming in to fund per student, that number reduces. And that is why you're paying the school fees that you are paying. So that capitation was initially about 22,000, but has been reduced to 17,000. Now, we're looking at total students enrollment in schools at 4.2 million, as well as number of students the current capitation can cover is 3.2 million. So we're having a gap of 1 million students that are not being covered by the government capitation. So ministry cuts school capitation by 22 billion shillings despite surge in enrollment, because we're having a higher number of students that are, moving to school, especially now with the 844 system that we're almost wrapping it up, because the current batch of students who are in Form 1 are the last 844 system STEM students. So those that are in now grade 8, grade 6, grade 5 are now the CBC curriculum. So it will be interesting to see how that pans out with the government funding. Joho says he's the best placed to run ODM party. The battle for ODM has already started with two leading contenders, former county governor of Kakamega, Wycliffe Oparanya, as well as former county governor of Mombasa, Ali Hassan Joho, because, when or if Raila Odinga goes to the African Union Commission as the chairperson, that means he will be able to leave his position as the ODM party leader, or at least as Mio coalition principal as well, and focus on this international duty. So that means there's a vacancy that is left. Now, those are the two deputy party leaders of ODM party. So it's a question on who is the best man to lead ODM party. So this is the story making headlines on the Standard. Now let's cross over to the Daily Nation that speaks on exposed shame of globe-trotting county officials. Exposed shame of globe-trotting county officials. Now, 13 counties that spent more on travel than they were generating in on-source revenue. Now, 13 counties have so far spent more on travel than they were generating in on-source revenue. So, basically, this is what we call living beyond your means, because do the math. I'll give you a simple context, basically. You're a father or a mother at a particular home, yeah? And you're required to pay 200 shillings for people to eat, but you've got, a revenue of 100 shillings. So basically, you're earning 100 shillings in a day. And so you say, no, this 100 shillings, let's do this. Let us go, visit our other aunties and uncles and see if we can get something from those aunties and uncles. And so you use this 100 shillings that would have basically been able to provide food, and you decide to go visit your aunt and uncles, but you do not get money at the end of the day from the other aunties and uncles. And so that is basically what is happening within the counties. Counties are spending more on travel, more than what they are getting or generating as on-source revenue. And so the damning verdict on October 30th last year, 2 7-member delegations from Kitui Assembly flew to Singapore to attend workshops and spent over 22 million shillings for the 5-day junket. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, as the Controller of Budgets report for the final half of last year found some counties were splashing more on travel than they were generating on-source revenue. Now, I'll give you samples of some of the counties that have been, highlighted. Bomet County, for instance, spent 128 million shillings on travel, yet its on-source revenue is at 67 million. So they spent double more than what they generating as revenue. Busia County spent 165 million on travel, yet it generates 133 million. Kericho County spent 257 million, generates 161. Kitui County spends 323 million on travel, yet it is generating 70 billion shillings. One other county as well. This includes Turkana County that is spending 335 billion shillings. On-source revenue is at 106 million. Tana River County is spending 160 million shillings on traveling, yet it's generating 30 million shillings. And there are so many more counties as well that have been highlighted by the Controller of Budget. And that is the story that is on the Daily Nation headline this morning. Exposed shame of globe-trotting county officials. Now, austerity. Counties continue to operate against the presidential directive to cease travel, but that is not the case. And, if you go to your page 6, 7 of the Daily Nation, they've been able to do all the counties, how much they spent on travel and how much they are generating as on-source revenue. Now that is really basically the picture of the counties and what is going wrong within the counties. But interestingly, Homa Bay County travel expenses is at 149 million shillings, but their on-source revenue is at 566 million shillings. So for Homa Bay County, they've been able to keep that balance. Perhaps a question of how much are they traveling? Are they traveling less for them to be able to keep that number at bay? But some of the counties as well have been highlighted are not spending exceeding their on-source revenue. They're just within that bracket, and so you'll be able to get more of that on the Daily Nation. Now, good news for content creators as President William Ruto shares a light moment in that picture. With comedian Stephen Okaka at State House, content creators in Kenya will earn from postings on meta platforms like Facebook and Instagram from June this year, following a deal between the government and Facebook. And the head of state held that meeting with Facebook management earlier on Monday. So content creators will be able to earn money from postings on meta platforms like Facebook and Instagram from June this year, following a deal between the government and Facebook. So that is your headline on the Daily Nation. Then finally, on the Star newspaper, why trouble looms for feuding governors and deputy governors. Why trouble looms for feuding governors and deputy governors. On Thursdays, senators kicked out Kisii deputy governor, ending the row with Simba Arati. Now, what are some of the troubled counties as the Star has stated? Initially, it was Kisii, where the governor and the deputy governor were not, on the same page. But now, the county governor, deputy governor, has been impeached. That is Robert Monda. Now, Kericho County, Eric Mutai and the deputy Fred Kitui also are having troubles. We're also looking at George Natembeya of Trans Nzoia and the deputy governor Philemona Kapkori. We're also looking at James Orengo of Siaya and the deputy William Oduo. In Meru, Kawira Mwangaza and the deputy Isaac Mutuma, as well as in Machakos, Wavinya Ndeti and the deputy Francis Mwangangi. So troubled counties, and that is a story that is on page 4 and page 5. Now, trouble looms for feuding county chiefs. It all falls down to the wire. On will we look at scenarios of more impeachments of the deputy governors or even governors for some of the cases, or will there be a balance of leadership between the counties? And so that is the headline on the Star, why trouble looms for feuding governors and deputy governors, because, senators have made an example out of Robert Monda, the deputy governor of Kisii County. And as they say in Swahili, cha mwenzako kikinyolewa, chako kitie maji. So troubled counties, that is the headline on the Star. Also, killer wife from Kangemi gets 35 years on appeal. That is a killer wife from Kangemi gets 35 years on appeal on the corridors of courts. Also, Nyanza MPs join battle for takeover of ODM party. Who will be the kingpin of the ODM party, or who will emerge victorious at the end of the day? So those are the newspapers' headlines. The Star, why trouble looms for feuding governors, deputy governors. Daily Nation, exposed shame of globe-trotting county officials. And then finally, the Standard, housing billions. Ruto has his way finally. All right, so allow us to take a quick breather, but when we come back, we'll be getting into the conversation on nutrition in childhood. After pregnancy or after you have successfully delivered your child, what next? What now do you feed your child? How do you incorporate your child? Because, this is a new baby. They cannot choose what they eat. So it's up to the parents to ensure that this child has a proper balanced diet, but also exclusive breastfeeding, what you need to know about it as well, the do's and don'ts. So that conversation coming up next, my guest in studio, that is a clinical nutritionist, Lynn Shatsala. So stay with us. We'll be back shortly with that conversation.
You are watching EBN TV, transforming your world.
In a fast-paced world filled with distractions, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters: your relationship with God. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we take you on a transformative journey of building your faith, without which it's impossible to please God. A journey of introspection and discovery of who you are in Christ Jesus.
For you to walk with God, you should not crumble when you come under pressure. Kama umeokoka, sema umeokoka mpaka mbele ya president, mpaka mbele ya chief justice, mpaka mbele ya kila mtu. Hiyo ndio kuokoka ya ukweli. Kuokoka ya ukweli.
Enjoy a faith-filled environment of worship and ministry of the word every Tuesday and Thursdays from 9 a.m. with Reverend Felix Kevoy, exclusively on EBN TV.
That is the word of the Lord today.
Every Thursday from 8:30 p.m.
Listen, every man needs God. And every man needs to learn to humble himself before God.
Enjoy teachings from Pastor Chris Oyakilome.
Here's what the Lord is instructing you to do. Prepare yourself in the Word of God. Feed your faith. Prepare yourself in the Word.
Build your faith and get to know who you are in Christ Jesus.
Feed your faith. There's a spiritual attack of some kind through sickness. Build your faith strong.
Every Thursday from 8:30 p.m. on EBN TV, transforming your world.
Hello, praise the Lord. My name is Pastor Joseph Musajawaza of Unfailing Love Ministries. I'm inviting you every Wednesday to join us on our program, Victory Through the Word. In this program, we teach you God's Word. We teach you to find solutions and answers to the struggles of life through the Word of God. Everything you ever go through in life, every pain, every tear, every worry, and every questions that you may ever have in this life. You may not get answers out there, but in God's Word, there are answers and there is a solution. The Bible says that God has exalted His Word above His name. In His Word, there is hope. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but His Word will always remain abide. I encourage you, engage with us as we study together, as you ask your questions, and let your questions be answered as you are built and as you hear God's Word. Our church is located in Umoja, Inako, near Olobon Hotel, just off Sango Stage along Moi Drive, and the court is known as Church Court. Give us a visit and your life will not remain the same. God bless you, and let's meet every Wednesday from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. only on EBN television.
You are watching EBN TV, transforming your world.
Good morning, welcome, and you're watching Morning Live. Thank you for staying with us. We're about to now get into a conversation that is so important, because most of us have at least gone through that particular stage, or we're in a surrounding where we are having, children that need to eat and also need to have the proper nutrition for them to grow properly. So I'd love us to get into this conversation on nutrition in childhood. I'm joined in studio by Lynn Shatala Wangusi, who's a licensed clinical nutritionist. Thank you for your time this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Right, and last time you were here, we did the pregnancy, nutrition in pregnancy, and we talked about, from the moment a woman, conceives all the way to the stage where she gives birth. And now we're getting into, we're sort of picking up from there, from that point where the mother has, just given birth and she's holding, her 1 year, her 1 day old child, and it now turns into a different stage of childhood. So perhaps we can start by just defining what the childhood age is. Is it from what point to what point do we say, oh, now this is a childhood stage?
Okay, so when we're thinking about when a mother gives birth, we are looking at infancy stage, up to, we can say, around 9 months.
Yeah.
But people try to assume that the tinier the baby, the more infant. But when we are looking at things from a clinical perspective, we look at childhood all the way from 0 to 5 years of age. But now in nutrition, we like to categorize. We like to take 0 to 2 years. Then now we deal with from 2 years to 5 years, because we think that at this stage it's when the nutrition is very critical for the child. When they grow up, the way things turn out for them in the nutrition perspective is going to strongly depend on how the foundation of nutrition was set at these early ages.
And you mentioned something important about the foundation of nutrition, because when the child is still in the mother's womb, they solely depend on the mom, what the mom eats and what the mom feeds, and you are able to take us through what they're supposed to eat all through the 9 months. Now we're having somebody that has been born, and then there's always that first step of the mother just breastfeeding the child. How important is it for a mom to ensure that they fully and excessively breastfeed their child?
Okay, so what the government has done and what all hospitals are trying to do at the moment, I may have mentioned this last time, but I think it's important in this particular session, is immediately a woman gives birth, they ensure that in the first hour after birth that the baby is attached for breastfeeding. This is because we want the mother to start producing milk as soon as possible. And for other mothers it may take some time. For other mothers it doesn't happen on as immediate as having the baby. Others it may take maybe a few days, but we try to ensure that the baby is attached as soon as possible. The baby is attached so that they can start breastfeeding, and it may take some time, but the milk will come. So you get that. Let's say a mother gives birth right now, and in 1 hour the baby is attached to start breastfeeding. We all know that colostrum is a very important aspect of beginning breastfeeding, because it's the one that carries all the important benefits of the baby. It has all the important nutrients, it has all the protective immunity aspect that is important for the baby. So we insist that a mother should start breastfeeding as soon as possible, and nurses really try to make this work. The moment the mother gives birth and they have the baby and the baby is all wrapped up, the moment the mother is able to sit up, they start breastfeeding as soon as possible. So nurses are really playing a vital role in ensuring that 1 hour attachment of the baby after birth happens.
Right. What is the longest period a mom can go without having breast milk?
I wouldn't say we would have an exact number of how long it would take, but it varies. It varies depending on very many other factors. To some people it takes a day, to others it takes 3 days, to others it may go as far as 4 or 5 days, and it usually becomes an even bigger issue when it's a preterm baby, when you get a baby at 7 months, because the whole body had not seen this coming. So we get for preterm mothers, most of the time it is an issue that keeps recurring. But for people who have term babies at 9 months, then it's easier for them to start breastfeeding as soon as they can. But this solely depends. We can't really say that there is a maximum number of days, because I really don't think we go so much into trying to capture the number of days that people go through, but it varies from person to person.
Right.
Yes.
Now, because I've seen instances where a baby is born so tiny, but after a couple of months, due to just exclusive breastfeeding, the child becomes sort of a huge baby, and you're like, the difference is quite clearly seen. So what is in the breast milk that really facilitates the growth of a child?
Okay, so breast milk literally has everything the baby needs. If we look at our diet as adults, we have the carbohydrates, we have the proteins, we have, so basically breast milk is everything that is in the woman's body. So the moment a lactating mother is eating, everything that she's eating is going to go into the breast milk to the child. you know, because you mentioned when we were beginning that the baby was solely depending on the mother when she was, when the mother was expectant. But this continues through exclusive breastfeeding because the baby is not eating anything. The baby is not taking water. The baby is still solely depending on the mother, because if the mother's diet is deficient in certain nutrients, then the milk is going to be deficient in those nutrients. Then this means this baby is more likely to be predisposed to a deficiency of the specific nutrients that are lacking in the lactating mother's diet. So we try to encourage mothers that throughout this stage, they still continue like feeding for 2, because the nutrients they lack is the nutrients the baby is going to lack. So that part is very important because the baby still depends on the mother for the nutrients, and the milk has everything. And that's why we encourage mothers that the moment a mother says, my child was thirsty, that is not a scientifically proven. The baby cannot be thirsty, you know. Breast milk originally in its form, it's already liquid, you know, and it contains enough water that this baby needs. The moment during the first 6 months, we say during the first 180 days of life, a baby should be exclusively breastfed. And we understand that we are in an era where we have working mothers and all that, you know, and some people tend to practice mixed feeding, where they breastfeed and then when they are not around the house, the person who's taking care of the child now uses milk formulation such as NAN and all that. But we try to encourage them. You see, right now we have technology that has enabled mothers to be able to express breast milk and store it for refrigeration. And you know, based on our economic status, we are at different places. There are people who can't really afford NAN every day because NAN is a little bit on the pricey side. Okay, not NAN specifically, like all these milk formulations that are used. They're not really cheap. It's not really, we can't say they are affordable in Kenyan terms for most of us, you know. So at this rate, we need to consider that breast milk is readily available. No buying, you're working with it. It's convenient, you know. You don't need to store it in a refrigerator. It's in perfect condition for the baby. So when parents are like looking at breastfeeding, and especially when we were dealing with a lot of teenage pregnancies, you know, young girls have these ideas, these myths and all these thoughts around how if I breastfeed my child, how is it going to make my body look, you know. But at the end of the day, if you want to lose all the baby fat that you gain during pregnancy, the best way to do is to breastfeed. You know, it is a method it is used as one of the methods of weight loss that you gain during pregnancy. So if it's about thinking about getting that perfect figure, then breastfeeding would be like your one way to go.
Nice. Now, you know, also for the mom, because this is a child from, you know, the from day 0, I'd say, to 6 months that are depending on you. So for the mom, what are you supposed to be taking at this point so that you also have enough breast milk for the child? And then perhaps you can also speak on the aspect of a mom that has got twins, you know. Feeding one baby is one story, but feeding 2 also is a different story as well.
Okay, so I'd like to first to talk about the issue about what the mother should eat. When we were going through the session on nutrition in pregnancy, we mentioned how it's important to have a diverse diet and how it is also important to eat in the amounts that are needed for you to like be able to provide for the body, for your body and that of your baby. Now when we go into lactating, the needs go even higher. You know, the baby keeps growing and their needs are also like increasing. You know, when they were in your body, they were like 2.5, at least 2.5 kilograms. And now every month we are expecting them to gain at least 0.5 kg per month, depending on the weight they were born with. You know, so we are expecting that the needs of this baby are going to continue increasing. And that means as much as the nutrition in pregnancy part was catered for, the mother has to include two snacks in between. Previously maybe they were eating let's say 2 snacks and 3 meals. Now it's going to be 4 snacks. And there's all this concept, there's all this I wouldn't say really myth, because it has some truth in it, but people believe that when you drink milk you get more milk as a lactating mother, which is really like, okay, the more liquids you take the better, because this is a liquid and we don't want you like you losing as much. You need to stay as hydrated as you can. But it's not really just the milk, it's more of the whole abundance, the whole density of the nutrients that are in your diet. So as much as you may stay as hydrated as possible, it is also important that your choices are nutrient rich. Somebody may say, because I need to stay hydrated, I'll just go and take juice, or I'll go mix something up and drink, but where is the nutrient density in whatever you're eating? It doesn't just have to be a liquid, it has to be something that is nutrient dense, so that as much as it also hydrates you, it also helps in meeting your needs and that of your baby. Right.
Now, I also mentioned the aspect of one mom that is expecting one baby, but also a mom that is expecting twins or triplets or quadruplets. So how do they maneuver within those first 6 months of breastfeeding, and to ensure that they do that exclusively and also balance amongst the child or the children they have?
I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm in no position to say it's easy, because definitely it's not, and one child, let's say one boy is like going to take it all away from you, So imagine what 2 boys can do. Imagine 3, imagine 4, Babies are a gift from God. And I would like to say that the Bible says God won't give you a challenge you can't handle. But also I'd also like to be very honest that when we have malnourished mothers and malnourished children during exclusive breastfeeding, most of the time it's people with twins and triplets, because we are telling this mother they need to add in two more snacks to deal with one baby. Now when they're having 2, it means they even have to go out of their way. They really have to eat more nutrient dense food, they have to stay as hydrated as possible, they have to avoid being as stressed as possible, so that they'll continue providing enough breast milk for both of their babies. And there's a way we have like different feeding methods for babies, and we try to encourage mothers that when you're breastfeeding, we tell them that you should breastfeed for at least 30 minutes. At least 30 minutes. And that applies to each baby, So that means people choose things differently. We have different ways of breastfeeding. We have the normal way, the one we know that you hold your baby and then they breastfeed. We have the cross arm where you can hold 2 babies, one this side and this side, and then they breastfeed, And our concern with twins is some of them develop preference. I don't have the right one, I like the left one, So the moment you give them the right one, they're like, this is not working for me. I want the one I like, So we try to encourage mothers to avoid like consistently having the child attached to only one breast, because then they'll develop that preference, And we try to also encourage mothers that depending on how it works for you, we can't really tell you to like handle both of them at once. Depending on how it works for you, you can choose to breastfeed one, finish, and then breastfeed the other. But then we would be so worried if you do that, because we're not really sure. Because one thing about breast milk, it doesn't just come out like breast milk. It starts with the watery part. So it starts with the watery part, then it goes to the milk part. So if you were to breastfeed one child and then put them aside and then breastfeed the next child, the first child is more likely to have drunk it's not really pure water, but it has some nutrients in it, but it is not as nutrient dense as the hind milk, you know. So we try to encourage mothers that if you can breastfeed both of them at once, the better, so that they can both get the first one, the fore milk, and the hind milk, the one that is very nutritious. And in this sense, when we tell mothers to like breastfeed for 30 minutes, it means that for twins, sometimes it may, like 30 minutes will apply to each. So it's at least 30 for this one, at least 30 for this one. And sometimes this may be a challenge for a mother. And we tell them to breastfeed at least 8 times a day per baby, at least 8 times a day, you know. So, and this applies for when we are not dealing with it in terms of demand, because breastfeeding is more of demand and supply. The moment the baby wants, you give it to them. But sometimes the baby stays a longer period of time without wanting, you know. So it is upon you to like take it upon yourself and make sure that your baby is getting enough. Because if you let them, when they're tiny, they'll sleep for as much time as they can, you know. So if you let them sleep in a lot and then breastfeed 2 times for 30 minutes each, it's not really helping us gain the amount of nutrients we'd want this baby to gain. So we encourage them that the more babies you have, the more nutrient-rich foods you need to take, you know. And because we get instances where one baby looks healthier than another one, you know, and it's not really, we can't really say it's the mother's fault, because as much as it's the mother breastfeeding, it is also upon us, the caregivers and the support system, to ensure that she has all the information she needs to know how she's going to tackle it.
Right. I've had scenario and cases where moms say, you know, their breast is paining when they go for a long time without breastfeeding. You'd hear them say the breast is painful, or sometimes it's leaking. How do we explain that?
Okay, so when we initiate breastfeeding in the first 1 hour, we're basically telling your body, we have a baby now. You need to start pumping us with milk. So you've been home, maybe you had a maternity leave, and 3 months or 4 months you were home taking care of your kid. Now you have to go back to work. It's going to take a whole new adjustment. Yes, definitely. If you are breastfeeding your baby exclusively, definitely milk is going to leak, you know, because it's, when you breastfeed 8 times a day, we are assuming at least after every 3 hours. So the moment it's 5 hours and you haven't breastfed, your mind is telling your body to produce breast milk. It doesn't know you've gone back to work. It's not like a switch we flip, you know. So the leaking is that is a part that everyone has to get to, because it happens, you know. So what we encourage mothers is, working mothers, if you can't have your baby at that time at work, then express your breast milk. We have all these companies that are producing these breast pumps, of which you can just express your breast milk, store it, and then put it somewhere. And most companies are actually like being encouraging mothers that are breastfeeding to come to work by having those rooms where they can express breast milk and everything. So this actually
revolutionizes.
Yes, it revolutionizes. So it does that, you know. It changes the whole way we look at things. So I strongly believe that if companies can take this up, then that is the way we are going to deal with this, you know. They're going to get a space where they can express breast milk. They're going to get a space where they have a fridge and they can store their breast milk until when they go home, then it can be used the following day, you know. So the leaking part, I think this is a part that every mother goes through the moment they leave their baby at home, or the moment they go without breastfeeding their baby.
Right. True. Okay. Now that we've talked much about breastfeeding, which, you know, is exclusive breastfeeding for that matter, for from the infancy stage all the way to about 6 months. Now let's talk about a baby that is now post 6 months, from now the 7th month. You said, you know, childhood goes all the way to 2 years. So I'd love us to go through those stages. Now from, you know, 6 months, we know you're now trying to introduce like a meal plan for this child. Perhaps they'll take the breast milk and something else. Where do you need to start from after your baby has clocked 6 months?
Okay, So we try to encourage mothers that when they start complementary feeding, they start it at 7 months. So that the first 6 months, which are the first 180 days of life, the baby exclusively breastfeeds. And when they're starting complementary feeding, for most mothers, I think they usually worried about what exactly they should take and how often they should give it, and how much should I reduce breastfeeding. Remember that before we got to complementary feeding, we were doing exclusive breastfeeding with breastfeeding for at least 8 times a day. Yeah? And when we go to 7 to 8 months and we're introducing these feeds, we are still at 8 breastfeeding sessions a day, you know. So the complementary is complementing the milk, you know. So 7 to 8 months, it's the food complementing the milk. But as we go, we'll get to a point where it's now the milk complementing the food, you know, because now we want to, children basically should be breastfed up to 5 years. But most of us know that it ends at 2 years because we try to like get done with that as much as possible. And you and I can both agree that when we were going to, at that time it was nursery school, and you were still breastfeeding, you would be so, you wouldn't want anybody to know, you know. So most people try to like say it's 0 to 2 years, but it's 0 to 5 years. So when we at 7 months, when we are introducing food, we try to encourage mothers to feed the baby at least 3 times in a day. And in these 3 times in a day, we are starting with as low as 2 tablespoons per session.
Just 2?
Yeah, exactly. And I know, coming from the Kenyan community and the way we like associate as eating as much food as possible as being healthy, when you tell a mother that the mother comes to the clinic and they're complaining, my baby just takes 2 tablespoons and I just started complementary feeding, what should I do? 2 tablespoons is pretty much okay.
The tablespoon?
The tablespoon, the one we eat with, not the teaspoon, the table, not the serving spoon, the tablespoon, 2. That is how we are starting. 2 to a maximum of half a bowl each time. And at this sense, okay, I would say like this cup is maybe 200 mils. So by the end of our 7th month, we are trying to say like half of this cup, you know. So mothers really have this idea that when I start complementary feeding, it's just me pumping the baby with food, which is not really the case. The food is complementing the
milk.
Yes. So the baby is still breastfeeding the 8 times a day they used to breastfeed. But now you're just adding meals in between, because at this stage, there is no way the food of the child is going to cater for all the nutrient needs they have. You know? That is why breast milk, because it has everything, comes in as the problem solver, you know. That's why we keep encouraging mothers to continue breastfeeding up to 2 years, so that in case there are any nutrients that this baby is missing in their diet because they are being picky eaters or because they are mostly things they can't eat, then they can make up for it through the breast milk. Okay?
Right.
Yeah, so I would say for 7 to 8 months, we still encourage mothers to maintain 8 times breastfeeding per day, and then 3 times, at least feed the baby 3 times with at least 2 tablespoons per sitting as we continue increasing. And it's important to mention that the consistency of the food here matters. This baby is just coming from a place where they were just taking breast milk, which is so liquidy, It doesn't have the high viscosity, so it's not so thick. So when we try to introduce food that are we improve the thickness as we continue with the breastfeeding and as the baby grows. And I would also like to mention that as much as we are trying to increase the thickness of the food as we go along, starting with tea is like out of the picture.
No tea.
Coming from a Luya community, I mean no tea. You know, we are not like in the place where, because tea is almost similar to breast milk in consistency, then we are thinking that tea would be the perfect thing to start. We even encourage mothers, the earliest you can give your baby milk is from 1 year, 1 year and above. a child below 1 year shouldn't even be taking tea. They can take milk, that we support. But above 1 year is when they start taking tea. And when people are starting complementary feeding, they usually with these cereals, the cereals, they like pumping their babies with cereals because you can mix it with milk. And then the mother says, I give my baby this in the morning because it makes them full.
Weetabix, you mean?
Things like Weetabix, all that. Like the list is endless. Cerelac. I think Weetabix is the most famous one. And you know, a mother says, I give my baby that so that they get full. But is that really a good thing? When we're starting complementary feeding, do we want your baby to be full? You know, Weetabix clearly mentions, the company mentions that it should be given to children above 2 years. It's written. We don't like to read. We don't want to take our time to read through things. But Weetabix mentions that it should be taken after 2 years. But we give it to our 8-month-old babies anyway, because when we put it in milk, it's so slurry and we feel like this is the right food. But something like Weetabix is very rich in fiber. That's why it's good, even for people who are like planning to lose weight, because it has no packed calories. It is mostly fiber. And what does fiber do? Fiber goes to the body and tells the body we are full. And remember, we're just starting complementary feeding. We want this baby to get as much nutrients from different places as possible. So we want them to eat as much food from different places as they can. But then Weetabix tells them, you know what? Your body is full. So when Weetabix writes in their packets that it's for children above 2 years, they're doing it coming from a place of knowledge, you know, a place of understanding. So if only mothers would get the concept, Weetabix would not just say it's for children above 2 years because they want children above 2 years to have more fun, you know. So when a company like advertises their products, when mothers are buying it, the first thing they should do is to read like, what is this company saying? Because it means that they are coming from a point of knowledge. So when Weetabix says it's above 2 years, then it's above 2 years. And most people go ahead and say that when you're starting complementary feeding, we start with porridge. I think everybody starts with porridge, which is okay. But then we get our porridge and we mix the silver sardines, the omena. We want to put in soya beans. We want to put in, I don't know, even people actually put green grams, you know? Like people are really being adventurous, you know? And then you tell them, do you take that porridge? No. Ni ya mtoto. So why would a child have to go through all that trauma?
And you yourself cannot.
And you cannot. You see, when we are doing research relating to children, we always like, if it's developing porridge flour, we give it to the mothers to be the ones that taste, because they know how their children would prefer it. But then mothers are going ahead to make the porridge flour differently for the child and differently for the rest of the household, because they are the ones who don't want to take omena in their porridge, but they want the baby to take omena. You know,
doesn't make sense.
We tell mothers that when you're starting complementary feeding 7 to 8 months, only one cereal in your porridge flour. It's not about the more the merrier, the less the better, because the digestive tract of the baby is still developing. They're coming from a point of having exclusive breast milk, and then you want to put in green grams, soya beans, omena, and then the body is wondering what's happening. And this is why we get so many instances of children having issues with their digestive tract. They're having diarrhea and stuff like that. Mostly because their intestines are not yet so built to handle so much. That's why when we're starting complementary feeding, we're starting with as low as 2 tablespoons. And in these 2 tablespoons, we don't want you to mix as many things as possible. So 7 to 8 months, we tell mothers, one cereal is enough. If you choose to start with maize flour, that's okay. If you choose to start with Wimby, that is okay. But one, don't mix. You know, as we continue, we are going to get to a place where you'll say 2 cereals. 9 months, 11 months, 12 months, you can use 2 cereals. No problem, okay? But when we are starting complementary feeding, just keep it 1 cereal. Keep it as simple as possible.
Right. Now, you know, you've mentioned about porridge. And what I see because I'm from an African home, so I see it a lot of times, is, you know, from that stage, we see parents that are doing pumpkins, are doing cooked bananas, you know, sort of that is the food that they're feeding their child. What would you recommend that as my child turns 7 months, what should be the first food I introduce them to?
I wouldn't like really say I have a specific food that I'd point out to be the best. But one thing the WHO guidelines mentions is that when you're starting complementary feeding, Wimbi is usually the best flour to begin with. Yeah? But for some children, Wimbi doesn't act well with them. They have diarrhea, so maize works with them. So it really depends with the child. But in terms of growing up, how we were fed on pumpkin, a lot of pumpkin, and then we had potatoes, and then we had cooked bananas. All those are okay, you know. We encourage them to go as diverse as possible. But one mistake that most households do is that the baby is fed on potatoes the whole week, just potatoes, mashed potatoes, you know. So it's mashed potatoes every day, until the food becomes boring. You know, the baby even gets tired because it's always the same color. It's not adventurous anymore. Yeah, they were going so adventurous with the porridge flour, but when it comes to these other staples, people are really not being adventurous with them. They're like stuck with the potatoes, and when they go so far, it's rice and potatoes. You know, but nowadays we encourage mothers that we have to think broadly. Having worked at Kisumu, we get, when other people are like really complaining about not knowing what to feed their children, people in Kisumu actually like have gone
the miles.
You know, they have omena in plenty, and actually they have the fresh ones, the ones that have not been deep fried, very soft. When you cook them, they are so soft, the baby would just go through with them. But I'm not saying like this, we are now doing this for the rest of our lives. You know, we also, despite that, and when we come to somewhere like the Luya community, they are very well known for their vegetables, you know. Very many indigenous vegetables. We have the likes of mrenda, we have the likes of nderema. You know, these slimy vegetables that go down your throat without you actually needing to chew. Now this is where the baby comes in, very happy. They're not even putting in the work anymore, you know. So as much as we may think we are limited in terms of the foods that are available to us, the foods are right before our eyes, but we just choose to close our minds to them, or we choose to be so careful that we are actually denying our children from things. And first-time mothers are usually culprits of this. They are the culprits of Weetabix, you know, because they are trying to be as careful as possible, and in being as careful as possible, the baby is missing out on so much. So I'm not saying that mothers should be reckless, but more of what is it that you eat. You know, when we talk about vitamin A, we talk about these yellow things, and pumpkin is one of them. Pumpkin is actually a very nice, a very nice food that is very rich in so many things, you know. But how do we bring this out? How do we prepare it for the baby so that they are eating more than one food group without actually mixing a lot, you know? So as much as we encourage mothers to introduce food slowly, one at a time. When it gets to a point and you know your baby likes carrots and they like potatoes and they like mrenda, now you know you can be adventurous with those, you know? And you know your baby doesn't like pumpkin. I'm not saying you stop. Babies are not really, I wouldn't want to say they're not smart, but they're really like, they really can't figure it out. So these are people you can play with, you know. If they don't like pumpkin, then that means
try something else.
They see pumpkin, but they like potatoes. So what do? You mix pumpkin and potatoes.
Oh, wow,
So they taste, they're like potatoes, but deep down, vitamin A is right in there, but they wouldn't know, you know. They get to the age of 2 years and you can't lie to them anymore. So let's use this period when you can play around with food without them actually like realizing you're playing around with food. Then this creates like a good environment for them to grow. And as these babies continue growing around, especially around 1 year to 2 years, now your baby doesn't like vegetables. And we have this aspect of responsive feeding. when we were young, we used to like have this feeding where your mother would put their hand below your mouth and then pour porridge there. Then it's either you drown or you you choose between drowning and drinking the porridge. So definitely drinking the porridge would win. But right now we are in an era where we want responsive feeding. We want you to play with your kid when they are eating. We want you to create an environment where they enjoy
when
the eating.
When they see feeding time, they're excited also. Yeah.
Because it gets to a time, and this especially applies to people who have house managers. They go to work, they leave their children with house managers. And then because your house manager has decided they want to play rough with the baby, they make feeding as awful as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as much as you may be providing for your baby everything they need, you leave the house and you've provided your baby with everything. When the house manager comes in and they're forcing food down your baby's throat, then the whole feeding experience is damaged. You know, you get to 2 years and your baby doesn't like eating. And then for us nutritionists, it becomes a concern because you come to us and you say, mtoto wangu hapendi kukula. So the moment you say your baby doesn't like eating, already this is trauma. You know, the baby has associated eating with so many bad feelings that when they see food, it scares them. You know, so that is why right now we encourage responsive feeding so that children will grow up with a good attitude towards food. And if it gets to a point where your baby doesn't eat vegetables anymore, they don't like vegetables, they just like beef and fish, and they're like picking the vegetables out of their food and putting them aside, then this means as a parent you have to deal with that, not by beating them. Okay, you may choose that path. I'm not the parent, so I'm not going to like tell you how to deal with that. But there is something we call the reward. I don't know what it is called exactly, but it is a concept of reward. The same way in working environments, when you do something good, they give you a trophy or they give you a title, you know. Now for children, we create something like a reward, you know. They have to finish the vegetables in the plate or else they are not eating the meat. Because the moment you give them the meat before the vegetables, or you say, oh, baby just wants this, then give baby that. Now we're going to have to deal with issues of obesity, you know, because the more fruits and more vegetables a child eats when they are younger, the more their nutritional status is going to be ideal when they grow up. Trying to like balance it out as much as we want as much protein, trying to balance it out. 1 year to 2 years we deal a lot with children who don't want to eat vegetables, but before that now we deal with mothers who don't want to give their children vegetables. They want to give their children stew. And you know, one thing I ask my mothers when they come to counseling is, how would you feel if your husband brought meat home and then they're serving meat and then serving you stew? You are the one who has to eat the stew.
They eat the meat.
Yes, they eat the meat, you eat the stew. It's not fair, you know. It's really not fair in the social way, and you feeling like you're not being loved enough. So this goes to the baby. And I used to tell women in Kisumu, the baby doesn't take the soup for omena. The baby takes the omena. The baby doesn't take the soup for beef. The baby takes the beef. That is why people have been so smart, people have been so innovative that we now have mixed meat. So that you don't have to deal with the trouble of, oh, my baby can't deal with this, it's so big, how am I going to make it tiny enough for them? You know. And now we have fresh omena, we have fresh fish that you can just cook and it's as soft. You know, so companies are really trying to come up with ways of actually making these things as soft as possible. And this is actually being very beneficial to the mothers, because then children can eat from a wide variety of sources as possible, compared to back then when we didn't have minced meat. I don't know how our parents used to do it, because then it was a challenge for them. It must have been, and it must have been challenging. But for us, we are in an era where we don't have to deal with that. The least we can do is to actually appreciate all the efforts that have been made to make this complementary feeding easier for us.
Right now, perhaps we can speak on some of the myths and misconceptions around nutrition, because we've had cases where word can really spread fast among moms, and they'll be like, usipe mtoto mayai atachelewa kuongea. And there are so many foods that even for certain tribes, you're not supposed to give your child this because one way or the other it affects how much they grow. So first and foremost, is eggs bad for a child?
Okay, so eggs is really not bad for your child. Egg is a very good source of protein, but most people are allergic to eggs, and sometimes this may be scary for mothers. Coming from a point of speech delaying, that is not a thing. It's just a myth, and people listen to it a lot. Actually, if you go down to the communities, a mother has eggs but they're not feeding their baby. Then we have the issue of kwashiorkor, malnutrition, where it's because of protein deficiency, because they don't want to feed their baby eggs because the neighbor told them that eggs. And one thing I'd assure you, nobody listens to things about babies like mothers and their neighbors. They even listen to medical practitioners less, And at the hospital, during nutrition education, we tell them we are paid to serve you. We are paid to tell you what we know and guide you. So at the moment when you start listening to your neighbor, you're reducing our workload. Do you want us to be paid for doing nothing? In Kenya, do you want us to be paid for doing nothing? No. So basically, mothers should be more prone to ask for guidance from professionals. But the neighbor, you see your neighbor's baby is so healthy and they're playing around the compound, and you're thinking, this baby must have been fed well, so you're going for advice from the mother. And babies take things differently. And then you apply the same things this mother applied to their baby, and your baby is malnourished, that are admitted at the hospital. There's this thing that people say, that sometimes people do things and nothing bad happens to them, but when you do it, yours is used as a testimony.
As an example.
So, to avoid all this, why don't we just do it the right way? With an egg being a very nutritious, a good protein source, why don't we just give it to our babies? But now when we are starting to give eggs to our babies, we really discourage the fried one, because we really don't want all the bad fat. The baby is starting to grow, so the boiled one is usually good because we retain all the nutrients and we don't have any alterations from oil and all that. But we now tell mothers, you don't give them at once. When you're starting to give your baby the egg, you start with the white part. You give them the white part, watch out for 2 days. Then the next time you make an egg, give them the yolk. Watch out for 2 days, so that you see if your baby is reacting to it. Because some babies are okay with the white part, but they react to the yolk. And some babies are okay with the yolk, but they react to the white part. So the only issue we have with the egg is that some people are allergic to it. And for us to identify the children that are actually allergic to it, then it means that we have to introduce it in the different parts that it has, so that we know, is my baby allergic to this? And if they are, then you find another option. But when you give your baby, egg, the full egg today, and then at lunchtime you give them minced meat, and then in the evening you give them fish. I know I said we'd be adventurous, but then when this baby has an allergic reaction,
you don't know what is causing it.
You'd be stuck, because you don't know really, is it the egg, is it the meat, is it the fish, because all these three things people are allergic to. So when you're introducing protein, once you know what works for your baby, you can incorporate it to other things. But before you know that, try using it only. Once I've known my baby is okay with egg, I use it. Then next time, now in the same day, I can also use beef. So that when they react, I'll know it's the beef, because I had already tried out the egg and the baby was okay with it.
Right. Let's speak on the malnutrition aspect as well, because you have instances, perhaps a mother is listening to you now and she did something wrong when the child was 6 months, already started incorporating food, or the baby is missing something and they've been declared malnutrition. Can this be reverted back to, she or he was malnutritioned, but now they're nutritious? Can it be reverted?
Okay, so we have two types of malnutrition. We have acute malnutrition and we have chronic malnutrition. And as the name suggests, chronic is chronic. Once the damage is done, reversing it when the baby is above 5 years or above 2 years becomes really a challenge, you know.
Yeah.
But goodness is, it's not really good, but the goodness is when you're malnourished below 2 years and we reverse it and you're okay, now you're properly nourished, and you don't keep having bouts of malnutrition. You know, it's so different when you have a malnutrition case until you're admitted at the hospital. We discharge you. Then 1 month later, you're back. We discharge you. 2 months later, you're back. We discharge you. You're really putting the nutritional status of this child at a very bad balance, you know, because now this predisposes them to chronic malnutrition. So the moment you have malnutrition and it's sorted out, you come to the hospital and your baby lives properly nourished. At the hospital, they make sure that every day, we keep telling mothers so that they don't forget, so that they don't say we were not told, because Kenyans really have this tendency of saying, oh, we were not told, even when they were told. So we tell them every day, you know, every day. When a child is admitted with malnutrition, they have a separate room. We call it the malnutrition room. Every day a nutritionist is there talking to these people, telling them how they should feed their children and asking them questions. And if a mother is very keen, when they leave that place, when they leave that place and go back home and practice what was taught and continue coming back for follow-up for the baby, because after their discharge we still have follow-up to ensure that the baby is gaining weight as they should, you know, then malnutrition should not be an issue that a baby has to suffer through in adulthood. And there's something we need to understand. Chronic malnutrition comes as height for age. The babies who are, when we have the mother child booklet in the hospital, we usually plot the height of the baby against the man. And the booklet has the green zone, the white zone, the red zone, you know, and the yellow zone. Actually, it has the white zone, the red zone, and the yellow zone. Once your baby is in the yellow zone, it means their height is not as good as it should be for somebody their age. You know? So this means there is something we're already not doing right. And it is the role of the mother, the nutritionist, and the support system to make sure that this baby moves from the almost yellow line to the white area. So that we won't have like an issue with the baby being stunted, because now stunted growth is both micronutrient deficiency and macronutrient deficiency. When we're talking about macronutrient deficiency, we have kwashiorkor and marasmus, the ones we know a lot, you know. But now stunted growth is like them combined, and then micronutrient deficiency in terms of zinc, iron, you know. So we try to encourage mothers to avoid chronic malnutrition. Proper nutrition is necessary throughout until the baby gets to 5 years. And to avoid getting to chronic malnutrition from a point of acute malnutrition. Once your baby has acute malnutrition, people make mistakes. Who are we kidding? As much as this session here is supposed to like provide information to prevent, there are still mistakes that happen. Children still get malnutrition. But are we in a place where we would move past that? Are you as a mother ready to like be held accountable and help your baby so that they'll never have to come back to the clinic with malnutrition again?
Right. So because we're out of time, I'd love you to combine the following. You've spoken of malnutrition. Now, somebody's wondering, how do you know the nutritional status of a child? So perhaps you can speak on that, and also on, if you're going to talk about childhood, this is somebody or a child from 0 days all the way to about 2 years. What happens if, unfortunately, the mother dies during birth? And, you know, they are not able to access whether it's breast milk, particularly for those 6 months. How, you know, do these children now survive, or what do we need to do, or what happens to that particular kind of child? So perhaps you can speak on two shortly as we wind it up.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the case of a child having malnutrition. There are these signs we actually look for. So sometimes when a child has malnutrition, they may have flaky hair, like their hair is sparse, brownish in color. That shows us is one of the telltale signs of malnutrition. When your baby doesn't have appetite, that in itself is also a sign. And sometimes you may think your baby is chubby, but when you press their hand or when you press their foot, it dips and it doesn't come back. Normally when you press your hand, it comes back, the skin comes back. But for a malnourished child, the skin is not as elastic because it has lost its elasticity. And when the water builds up in the body, now when you press, it doesn't come up. So as much as your baby may look chubby, if you press their skin or their feet and then it sinks in and doesn't come up as fast as it should, then that is in itself something for concern. And when your baby's ribs are showing, you know, it's showing that they are wasted and all that. All these are telltale signs. So the moment, one of the telltale signs for each, I'd want us for not. For something like kwashiorkor, your baby may not have appetite. They may have like edema where their legs swell and their hands. So when your child is chubby, please check. Is it the good chubby or the bad chubby? And then for marasmus, they may lose a lot of weight. That one you'll know. The baby will be wasted, ribs will be showing, they'll have hanging skin on their arms and on their thighs, you know. So that you look for. And then their children are just very irritable. I know sometimes they cry a lot. But then there is just a child that is too much irritable. That in itself is a sign. So these combined with the telltale signs I've told you, these can be used by mothers to like identify. Right. And then touching on
the mother's death.
When the child loses, in the unfortunate event that the child loses the mother, in the past, it used to be allowed that somebody who's breastfeeding can breastfeed another person's child. But nowadays, because of HIV and all other infections, we don't allow that anymore, right? So the moment a child loses the mother, it's upon the guardian to now go and see the nutritionist, because we have different paths that this child is going to take without getting malnourished. So the moment the mother dies, it's not about like introducing porridge or introducing cow's milk, because the baby will get malnourished. And unfortunately, if this is not managed, the baby will die. You know. So all this would have been in vain. It is important that for households that can't afford these breast milk formulas, then going to see a nutritionist, the nutritionist would guide you through. We have different ways of how you can use cow's milk to actually prepare a very nutritious solution for your baby that will not lead to them having issues such as diarrhea and all that. So when a child loses the mother, it is up to the father of the child or the caregiver of that child to go to the nearest hospital, see the nutritionist, be given the guidelines of how this baby is going to have optimal nutrition during the first 6 months, so that we prevent issues in the future.
Right. So Aline, I'd love to give you 30 seconds to wrap it up, just 30. You know, somebody that perhaps is just tuning in and is wondering, you know, what did I miss? So perhaps you can do that in 30 seconds as we wrap it up.
Okay, so I would say nutrition in childhood, mothers should just exclusively breastfeed for the first 6 months of their child's life. And when they have issues as such as going back to work and then dealing with painful boobs and all that, then they need to go see the nutritionist or the clinical person that is available in the hospital, so that they can really help with guiding them through. And when a baby loses the mother, we have solutions for that is not buying breast milk formulas, something that is affordable. So if only the community, if only the population would like give medical practitioners the chance, you know, like ask for guidance more, ask for counseling more, come to the hospital whenever they are worried, then would really avoid all these issues that we have to deal with about malnutrition in childhood.
All right. Thank you very much, Lynn Shatala Wangusi, who's a licensed clinical nutritionist, for coming in to really speak about nutrition in childhood and what's a step we've made actually, because, you know, we started with the nutrition in pregnancy, we've moved now to childhood, so that as a mom or, you know, an expectant mom, you'll know what to do when you're expectant as well as what to do when your child arrives. So that has been the conversation this morning. In case you've missed this broadcast, you can rewatch it across our social media platforms on EBN TV, and we'd love to keep this conversation going throughout the day. So thank you for watching once again. Have yourselves a fantastic morning. I'm Cynthia Nanjala.